This is our stop line, but doesn't look like people are going to listen. Hey guys, Bratty Biker here. So, the topic is basically about like two-stroke deacceleration when you're coming downhill. So, let's take a bridge for this moment because we don't have a hill inside the city. So, there is a bridge coming up. So, if it is free, I'll just try showing you what people are doing wrong and what they can do instead of that. So when deaccelerating or coming downhill, do not do this. Leave your throttle, leave your clutch. Do this. Hold your clutch, leave your throttle. And then once you're down, just give a little bit of throttle. And now give some throttle, rev match and leave your clutch. So that's how it should be done. It all has to do with two-stroke lubrication, guys. Due to the lockdown, we are all indoors. And before I begin the explanation, I want to show you one more time, more clearly, on what people generally do when they are coming down a bridge versus what I am doing when I am coming down a bridge on a two-stroke motorcycle like this Yamaha RXG, and why I think what I am doing is the right way of doing it. What people generally do when they are going to start to decline or when they are going to start to come down the bridge is that I am assuming that they have a good speed of about 40 to 60 kilometers per hour indicated on the speedometer, and then they let go of the clutch and they let go of the throttle and they let the bike to coast down until they exit the bridge. What I am doing is, once I've reached the top of the bridge and once I'm going to descend or once I'm going to come down, I make sure that my speed indicated in the speedometer is between 40 to 60 kilometers per hour, and I make a note of the engine RPM. And what I do is, right when I start to come down, I hold the clutch and I leave the throttle. And once I have exited the bridge, I'm still holding the clutch. What I do is I give a little bit of throttle and then I let go of my clutch and I continue my ride. The last part where I give a little bit of throttle and then I let go of the clutch and keep going forward, this process is called as Rev-Matching, and I'll explain why this is really beneficial for two-stroke motorcycles. I'm off my motorcycle and let me begin explaining. Let us take some parts that are really crucial in this subject, starting with our two-stroke engine lubrication system. The way two-stroke engines are lubricated is exactly why I avoid coasting the engine down a bridge by leaving the clutch and leaving the throttle. Instead, I hold the clutch and I close the throttle. So, we have two methods of lubricating our two-stroke engines. The first one is where we directly premix oil along with the petrol when you are filling up at a fuel station. Or two is when you have an oil pump that can take oil from the oil tank and pump it to the engine through the carburetor. In both the methods of lubricating our two-stroke engines, the unfortunate problem of oil starvation or lubrication starvation still occurs if you want to coast your motorcycle down a hill or down a bridge by not holding the clutch and not opening the throttle. Let me explain why. A small note here: when you hold the clutch, you're disengaging the clutch. When you let go of the clutch, you're engaging the clutch. So I hope that does not cause any confusions further. So let's take our engine, our clutch and our rear wheel. When you're coming down a hill, you have gravity which will accelerate you faster, so you do not need to use the throttle. This is why what most people do is that they let go of the clutch and they let go of the throttle, because the engine is going to coast down and probably accelerate a little bit.
Please remember that it is the throttle input that decides on how much oil enters into the crankcase, lubricates the crankshaft, the crank bearings, the connecting rod bearings, gets into the combustion chamber, lubricates the cylinder sidewalls, the piston rings, and the piston sidewalls. The wider your throttle is open, the more oil is going to go into the cylinder.
The problem here, if you're running with an oil pump, let's take the oil pump. This is for a Yamaha RX 135 series. The RX 100 had a different pump, but it all essentially worked the same way. So here you have something that rotates, and this notch right here, this connects to the throttle. The throttle cable comes from there, it splits into two. One goes to the carburetor and one goes to this oil pump. And when you're opening the throttle, the amount of throttle input that you have, this is tuned in a way to work in the same way as the throttle input. So it is going to send the required amount of oil that is designed by the R&D engineers of this motorcycle back in the day. When you're coming down a hill and if you let go of the clutch lever, your clutch is still engaged. So the power that is coming from the rear wheel due to the gravity, which is forcing it to spin faster, this is getting transferred to the primary gear, that transfers that power to the crankshaft, and it is going to make the crankshaft rotate faster. So the piston is going to move up and down faster. It is forced to do that, and since your throttle is closed, this is also closed, and it is only going to send the amount of oil that is required for idling RPM while your engine is still rotating at a much higher RPM. So what essentially happens is that the engine is not receiving the required lubrication for that particular engine speed, which is much higher than the idling RPM. That is why you accelerate the wear and tear, the friction between the very crucial parts like the bearings, the crankshaft, the connecting rod, the piston rings, the cylinder sidewalls.
So now that I've explained what happens when you have an oil pump and when you're coasting along with the throttle closed, as the oil pump is only able to deliver the oil that is required for an engine at idle speed, but you're having an engine that is running at a much higher RPM. But in this case, where you're running the bike fully premixed without relying on an oil pump to take care of the engine lubrication needs. In both these cases, the throttle is the common standpoint. The throttle is connected to the slide in the carburetor. So the higher the slide raises due to you opening the throttle, the more air and premixed fuel is going to be let into the crankcase. So if you are coasting down a hill or down a bridge with your clutch engaged, that is, if you let go of the clutch lever and if you have your throttle closed, your engine is forced to work harder, but it is not going to receive the required amount of oil because your throttle is not open to match the certain RPM or the engine speed.
This is why a lot of people end up with seized engines, and this can accelerate wear and tear because your bearings, your piston rings, your cylinder sidewalls, your crankshaft is essentially not receiving the required amount of oil, and there is a lot more wear and tear and friction between them. This is why I hold the clutch and I leave the throttle.
Since I am holding down my clutch lever, the gravitational effects that is accelerating my motorcycle downwards does not accelerate my engine speed. And as I disengage the clutch, the engine speed now comes down and settles at an idle RPM. So it is not starved of lubrication because it is still receiving the normal amount of oil that is required for an engine at idle RPM, and the engine is idling at idle RPM. So there is no case of lubrication starvation here, and I definitely prolong the life of my cylinder, my piston rings, my piston, my connecting rod, bearings, the crankshaft. After I finish exiting the bridge, I do something called as Rev-Matching. Basically what I'm doing is that I'm matching my engine speed to the speed of the rear wheel on the corresponding gear. I take a note of the speed indicated on the speedometer. I'm still holding on the clutch, so I change to the appropriate gear for the appropriate speed. Still I'm holding on to the clutch. I blip the throttle. This will make sure the engine will rev up freely, but before it comes back and settles down, I quickly leave the clutch. This is a great practice as it will prolong the life of your primary gear, your clutch bell, your clutch and pressure plates, your gearbox, your front and rear sprocket, and of course your chain. This is also a safety feature because if you misjudge it and if you do not practice rev matching, it is also a safety hazard where the bike can throw you off due to the sudden deacceleration, and in the case of a two-stroke engine it can cause a seizure as you're increasing your RPM since the throttle is closed and you're trying to do engine braking. Again, the effects are the same. You still have lubrication starvation.
So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching, guys. Do leave a like if you like this video. Do comment your suggestions, video requests. I'll try to put my best efforts and to get it done for you guys and educate you during this lockdown. Do subscribe to the channel. Keep the blue smoke alive. Bratty Biker signing off. Have a wonderful evening.